Hello, everybody. Happy Hump Day. No, you're not imagining things. Today is Wednesday, May 1st, 2024, and this is your delayed Monday market update on Wednesday. As I mentioned last week, due to Passover, I was unable to do this video until today. There have been a few times in the past 3 or 4 years of doing this that I've had to push the video so far, so I'm going to try to get all of last week and the first 2 days of this week all covered. That being said, I'm going to jump right in. Last Monday, stocks started the week with a roar. Stocks gapped higher at the open, and one of the main reasons for this, lack of bad news over the weekend. I don't necessarily like the idea that we go up a lot on no bad news, but we seemed like a short covering rally in the afternoon. Biggest losers from the week before were the winners this time. So the S&P did cool down into the close, but not before putting in a nice showing. The Dow was up 2/3%, S&P up over 0.75%, and the NASDAQ was up almost 1.25%. Remember, markets had some ground to make up. Going into Monday, markets had been down for 6 straight. Tuesday brought more green as stocks gapped higher again, led by mega cap growth, and markets liked the quiet in the geopolitical front. I wonder how many times we can go to that well, so we'll find out. Big cap earnings looked good before the open, and EcoData took bond yields down and stocks higher. Add in a strong 2-year auction, and we got caution from Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, but markets ignored that. Markets closed strong. The Dow was up 0.75%, S&P up 1.25%, and the NASDAQ up 1.5%. Markets geared up for some big earnings, and of course, EcoData at the end of the week. Markets opened up on Wednesday, but without too much excitement. Tesla and Texas Instruments had good earnings reports, but that was not enough. The 10-year Treasury yield tested new highs. Turned out earnings were not enough to get this market excited. News was quiet, and that also was not enough to see anything happen. So by the end of the quiet day, the Dow was down 0.1%, S&P down just a hair up just a hair into the green, and the NASDAQ was up 0.1%. After the Bell Meta, the old Facebook, reported earnings, and it got slammed. A lot of reasons given, but it seemed the markets do not like them spending billions on the metaverse. Sound familiar? Last time there was a big sell-off, same issue. Stocks were meaningfully lower on Thursday. You heard me, lower. That's right. The market was reacting to Meta's news, but also to the EcoData, GDP and PCE price index, giving a small sign of what might just look like or smell like stagflation. Economic slowdown and sticky inflation, bad combination. IBM joined Meta in the red, down almost 10% versus Meta's 15% drop. The overall feel was negative, and that took markets down. There was not a lot of follow-through selling, and markets did rally into the end of the day. Google and Microsoft announced earnings after the close, and that was highly anticipated, and they did not disappoint. Markets were watching for the core PCE number on Friday at the end of the trading session. The Dow was down about 1%, S&P down about 0.5%, the NASDAQ was down about 2/3%. With core PCE release on Friday, markets were on the lookout. Oddly enough, core PCE rose more than expected, showing that inflation is sticky and prices are still inching up. Not at 9% like it was, but still 2.8%, which is higher than the Fed's 2% target. Markets did ignore this and opened higher. Google and Microsoft earnings helped to fuel that optimism. Chevron and Exxon were on the other side. Energy was having a rough day. University of Michigan survey of consumer sentiment showed little change, and inflation expectations have ticked higher. But again, market was not interested. Overall, I've been talking about this for weeks now. It's like a magician. They wave their right hand, and you watch that. All the while, the left hand is doing the trick. This is what's been going on. Markets have been waving their hands, or at least those who run the media. They're focused on the right hand, that of Powell and the Fed. All that while we've gone from expecting 6 cuts this year to maybe none. While we're watching that hand, the key to the markets, as I've been saying, in my opinion, is the earnings. That's what drove markets on Friday. It hit 2 of the pillars of the markets. 1, growth has not fallen off a cliff, and 2, AI mania. This is still enough to excite people. It has slowed a bit, like every other mania in history. There will be a reckoning, but the companies that are actually monetizing AI, they will make noise. Others, just talking about it, it'll move your stock in the short term, not as much in the long term. By the end of the day, the Dow was up about 0.5%. S&P was up 1%, and the NASDAQ was up 2%. On the week, the best week since November for the S&P, at up 2.75%, and the NASDAQ was up 4.25%. The Dow was up, but only about 0.75%. Not a record week for them, but more earnings and more everything was still left before today's video. Markets went into the weekend watching the Middle East and anticipating earnings from Apple and Amazon, as well as Fed meetings, a decision today coming out of the weekend. Markets on Monday had wind at their backs and a week of catalysts ahead. Monday did not have those catalysts. No Fed speakers, no eco data, no major earnings before the bell. So it just had momentum. But that just kept things churning around. Slight dip in the afternoon when the Treasury Department did announce their refunding numbers, and they were 20% higher than expected. A few months ago, that would have driven the market crazy. Not Monday, but yields did spike briefly and stocks dipped briefly. Then the ship got its balance back. Markets did close near the high for the day, getting set up for the week and the news to come. All three indices closed up about 1/3 of 1%. Recall that I've always said that when the markets are too lockstep in closes, that it just may be the algos running the show. So if you were bored on Monday, Tuesday may have kept you out of your seat, not necessarily in a good way. Sea of red, eco data led the charge, and a lot of stagflation talk. Employment costs up, home prices up, consumer confidence down. Remember, hot or sticky inflation and slowing growth is the recipe for stagflation. Markets gapped lower at the open, steadied, then took a leg lower when none other than Janet Yellen of Treasury this time said that she was concerned about the direction of the U.S. deficit. Short yields went to session highs and stocks kept drifting lower. There was a lot of positioning into today's Fed announcement and press conference. I'll talk about that in a moment. But by the end of the day, the Dow was down 1.5%, S&P down just just more than that, and the NASDAQ was down just over 2%. All right, here we are on Wednesday. I like to preview the week, so let's do that for the last 3 days, but also hit on some of today's news and keep that relevant. First, today, a lot of earnings hit last night. Starbucks, Amazon, CVS, news from Johnson & Johnson, and those stocks are on the move. Later this morning, we'll get jobs data. ADP is already in, a bit higher than expected. Still in the pipeline today is JOLTS and construction spending. Then this afternoon, we'll get the Fed statement and the Powell press conference. I maintain that although this is taking some of the oxygen out of the room, earnings is still the main focus. I still believe, yes, the Fed is going to push things around in the very short term. Just review today's video, up 2%, down 2%. But earnings are going to rule the show, not just because of valuations, but as I've mentioned before, stagflation is a key now, and that is slowing growth and higher rates. We know, or at least we think we know, that we're going to see rates higher for longer, but the other part of that equation can hold us up if we maintain growth to some degree. This is not just a one-factor equation. Still to come this week will be productivity, jobless claims, capital goods orders, unit labor costs. That's going to be going to get some extra attention based on the news from earlier this week about labor costs, and a large part of the inflation equation. Friday is jobs day, so non-farm payroll and all the supporting data that comes with it, prices, productivity, unemployment rate. So that's a key to watch. And since you missed them, to our tour, the tour resumes since the blackout period is up for Fed heads. We'll get Goolsby, Williams, and Cook before the weekend is done. Okay, we're at today, and I hope you get to see this in a timely way. We'll post it and send it as soon as my amazing team approves it. I'm so appreciative of them and their support. Friday, I'll be back with a planning video, and back on Monday with a recap of what's left of this week and a preview of the next week. We're in the heart of earnings season, and geopolitics might just play in as well. Stay safe, stay in touch. Please call with any questions. Happy May Day and National Travel Agents Day. Big thanks to our travel agent for getting my boys back from Israel. They're headed back there soon. Have a great week.